She had never thought of herself as someone special enough to be remembered. But one night, under a relentless downpour, she saved the life of a man the whole world admired. And then, like a gust of wind, she vanished, leaving behind only a clumsy scrawl, "You're going to be okay." Sometimes the quietest acts of kindness write the most extraordinary stories. Can a small, trembling heart find the courage to step out of the shadows, to be seen, and to be loved? The dim light of an old brass desk lamp reflected off the rim of a cold cup of tea. In a tiny 30-square-meter apartment on the outskirts of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Chloe sat alone before her laptop. The soft tapping of the keyboard blended with the steady clatter of the space heater sputtering in the corner. Outside the window, a fine mist of rain fell quietly onto the weathered red brick rooftops, soaking the patchy cobblestone streets, glistening under the yellow streetlights. It was late autumn in Gettysburg. The damp, chill air lulled the whole town into an early slumber. The trees, stripped bare, stretched skeletal limbs against the leaden sky. Chloe shifted closer to her desk and pulled a beige lambswool cardigan over her shoulders. She was still young, only 26, but the slight slope of her shoulders seemed to carry more worries than her years should allow. She worked as a freelance programmer, taking on small projects from startups based in New York and Boston. It was the perfect kind of solitude for someone as inward as Chloe. She could work, communicate via email, and never have to endure the wary glances she always felt, even when no one meant to give them. Her phone buzzed. A notification from an old university Facebook group, Reunion Party. "In Philadelphia next week. Who's coming?" A list of familiar names appeared, people who had once made Chloe shrink into herself. She sighed and locked her screen without a second thought. Chloe stood and glanced around her little apartment. A worn armchair, a few shelves crammed with novels by Colleen Hoover and Nicholas Sparks, a shriveled cactus she had forgotten to water. No pets, no family nearby. Her parents were back in Iowa, and since graduation, Chloe had chosen this solitary life in Pennsylvania, a place far enough to start over, quiet enough to keep her invisible. The steady patter of rain on the roof soothed her. She threw on a hoodie, wrapped a hand-woven scarf around her neck, and slid her feet into waterproof boots. She needed to pick up a few groceries. Instacart could have delivered, but Chloe liked the feeling of stepping outside, even if only for a few fleeting minutes. The street was nearly deserted when she pushed open the door. A gust of frigid wind swept through, stirring brittle leaves along the pavement. Colonial-style houses huddled low under the rain, lined either side. Of the road, Chloe stuffed her hands into her pockets and made her way quickly across the main street. Miller's grocery was still open, its flickering neon sign reflected in the wet sidewalk. An old pickup truck sat out front, its tires caked in mud. Inside, the bell above the door jingled. Chloe gave a small nod to Mr. Miller, a man in his 60s with a shock of white hair peeking out from under a faded baseball cap. He was restocking boxes near the counter. "Late night, Chloe," he said with a raspy, cigarette-worn voice. "Good evening, sir," Chloe replied softly. She grabbed a plastic basket and wandered through the narrow aisles under the flickering fluorescent lights. A few packs of ramen, a carton of almond milk, a bag of Fuji apples, and some chamomile tea. Simple, easy-to-keep things, just like her life. At the checkout, Mr. Miller asked, "Work treating you okay? I hear it's freezing up in New York." Chloe nodded, handing over her credit card. "It's fine. Thankfully, I work remotely." He swiped the card through an ancient POS machine and handed it back with a brown paper bag. "It's always quieter here than in the big city," he said, a kind encouragement. Chloe smiled faintly, hugging the bag to her chest as she stepped back into the rain. The shop's warm light spilled onto the glistening street, reflecting her small, wavering shadow. Instead of heading straight home, Chloe drifted toward the town square. An old war monument loomed at its center, wreaths soaked and drooping under the persistent rain. She sheltered under the awning of a closed shop, gazing at a faded mural of angel wings painted on the opposite wall. Someone had scrawled in white paint beneath them, "Not all angels have wings." Chloe gave a sad smile. Not all angels flew. Some simply stood quietly in the rain, enduring. A cold gust made her shiver. She pulled the scarf tighter around her neck and turned for home. Later, after putting the groceries away, Chloe sat by the window, cradling a steaming cup of tea. Through the fogged glass, she watched rooftops doze under the endless rain. Part of her longed to live as boldly as those she envied, to dare to love, to fail, to believe again. But a larger, more fearful part held her frozen, terrified of being hurt once more. She opened her laptop and checked her inbox. A new project offer from a Brooklyn startup waited for her. Chloe typed a quick reply, hit send, and leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The night slipped by in the small town, cold and silent, the rain falling in steady rhythm, like the quiet, aching heartbeat of a young woman still learning how to survive alone in a vast, indifferent world. The rain was falling harder when Chloe left Anderson's bookstore, a tiny shop tucked at the corner of West Middle Street. She pulled up the hood of her jacket and clutched the newly purchased novel against her chest. The sky was the color of spilled ink, and the dim streetlights bled faint, wavering beams through the downpour. The night was bitterly cold. Each breath Chloe exhaled unfurled in small plumes of vapor. The cobbled streets, slick with rain, forced her to slow her steps. The sound of the downpour drummed on tin awnings and weather-beaten wooden signs, blending with the low moan of the wind threading through the narrow alleys. Chloe usually avoided walking in heavy rain, but tonight, after an entire day cooped up in her rented room, she needed to step outside. She had only intended to buy a book, to read it under the warm halo of her desk lamp, to remind herself that somewhere in the world, softness still existed. As she turned onto Steinwehr Avenue, a road connecting the town center to the southern hills, a shrill sound tore through the rain, the screech of tires on wet pavement, the gut-wrenching crunch of metal. Chloe froze, heart hammering in her chest. She looked toward the noise. A black SUV had skidded off the road, crashing into a shallow ditch. The front wheels were buried deep in the muddy embankment, the hood crumpled, one headlight flickering weakly. For a moment, Chloe stood paralyzed. Inside the vehicle, a figure slumped motionless. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the engine. Her heart thudded wildly. What should she do? Did she have her phone? Yes, in her pocket. But was she brave enough? 1,000 reasons. To walk away flooded her mind. She was just a small, unremarkable programmer, not a hero. Yet a fiercer thought pushed forward. What if he needs help right now? Her hands trembling, Chloe fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb and slipping against the wet screen. She dialed 911 and pressed it to her ear. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. There's been a car. Accident on Steinwehr Avenue, Chloe stammered. An SUV, the driver's unconscious. I don't know what to do. Stay calm. Are you safe? Yes. I'm standing by the road. An ambulance is on its way. Can you safely approach the victim? Chloe glanced at the SUV about 30 paces away, its broken headlight blinking like a dying star. She swallowed hard, nodding instinctively, even though the dispatcher couldn't see her. I'll try. Good. You're doing great. Keep the line open. Be careful. Gripping the phone tightly, Chloe drew a shaky breath and plunged into the downpour. Her boots skidded in the mud, icy water seeping into her socks, but she didn't stop. Reaching the vehicle, Chloe found the driver's door jammed. She rushed around to the passenger side. Luck was on her side. The door was unlocked. She yanked it open, a blast of cold air and the acrid smell of smoke meeting her. Inside, the man in the driver's seat was slumped forward against the wheel, a thin trickle of blood trailing from his temple, mingling with the raindrops dripping from the ceiling. Chloe heard the dispatcher's voice in her ear. Is the victim responding? Chloe's voice shook. He's unconscious, but he's breathing. His chest is moving. Good. Don't move his neck. Just stay with him. Reassure him until help arrives. She set her bag and phone aside and leaned into the car. Tentatively, she grasped his hand, squeezing it gently. You're going to be okay, she whispered, her voice breaking from cold and fear. Just stay with me, please. The moment stretched unbearably long. Chloe didn't know if he could hear her, but she refused to let go. And then she felt it. A faint twitch of his fingers, a fragile, instinctive response. The wail of... The ambulance grew louder, slicing through the rain-heavy night. Chloe exhaled a shaky breath, her whole body trembling with adrenaline. As the flashing lights illuminated the waterlogged ditch, Chloe pulled back, stumbling out of the way. A paramedic in a reflective jacket rushed toward her. "Are you the one who called 911? She nodded, shivering. "Are you hurt?" "No." "I'm fine," she whispered. The ambulance's siren screamed closer. Chloe cast one last glance at the unconscious man, then clenched her fists at her side, steeling herself to slip away, back into the cold and endless rain. The red strobe of the ambulance flickered at the far end of the street, bleeding into the puddles that mirrored the shattered sky. Chloe stood frozen by the SUV's open door, rain soaking her through, her body trembling with cold and adrenaline. Her hand was still wrapped around the unconscious man's, their fingers woven together in a fragile human knot. She didn't know how long she'd been standing there. She only knew that before the professionals arrived, before she had to disappear, she needed to leave something behind. A final tether in the dark. Hurried footsteps splashed closer. The paramedics were coming, their reflective jackets glowing. Under the deluge, Chloe knew she couldn't let them see her. She had to slip away, but first she rummaged through her backpack, fingers clumsy and stiff, and pulled out a crumpled receipt from Anderson's bookstore. Hands shaking so badly she could hardly hold the pen, Chloe scrawled the only words she could summon from the raw center of her heart. "You're going to be okay. No name, no trace." Just a simple, fragile lifeline in the rain-choked night. She tucked the scrap of paper into the man's cold hand and squeezed his fingers, a silent promise stitched into the storm. "You're going to be okay," she whispered again, her voice swallowed by the relentless drumming of the rain. It wasn't until a beam of flashlight swept dangerously close to her boots that Chloe jolted back to herself. No more time. She stumbled away from the SUV, yanking her hood lower over her face, clutching her backpack tight against her chest, and fled into the sheets of rain. Her hurried footsteps splashed down the length of Steinwehr Avenue, and then she slipped into the labyrinth of narrow alleys, vanishing into the cold, wet shadows. The wind slapped her face, rain saturated her jeans, but she didn't stop. She just needed to get out of sight, to return to her quiet, invisible life. Back at the scene, the paramedics reached the SUV. One opened the door, assessing the victim, while another readied the stretcher. "He's breathing," one paramedic reported through the radio. "Minor head traumas. We need to stabilize his neck and move him now." As they peeled the man's glove away to check his pulse, a small piece of paper fluttered out and landed in the water pooling by the door. Curious, a paramedic stooped, plucked it up, and read aloud into the wet night. "You're going to be okay." Everyone paused for a beat, their faces softening. In the cold chaos of that rain-drenched street, that single trembling message, a quiet, nameless kindness, was a thread stitching the brokenness together. Half-conscious, Ethan Grayson clung to the faint memory of a hand in his, the ghost of a voice whispering him back from the edge. It was the only thing keeping him anchored in the smothering dark. He clenched the scrap of paper in his hand as they loaded him onto the stretcher, holding on as if to the last slender thread of hope. Meanwhile, Chloe had crossed 3 blocks, winding through the back alleys behind Main Street. Her breath came in ragged clouds, her heart pounding, not from the run, but from a tremor of emotion too big for words. She knew she wasn't a hero. She wasn't anyone special. But tonight she had done something that mattered. Something small, something invisible. And somehow that was enough to warm her frozen heart. Back at her tiny second-floor apartment in the old brick building, Chloe kicked off her soaked boots and let her backpack slump to the floor. She stood there in the dark, listening to the rain hammer against the tin roof. She didn't turn on the lights, didn't brew tea like she usually would. She just stood still, letting the wild rhythm inside her chest slowly settle. Chloe pulled open her desk drawer and took out an old notebook. On the first page, beneath the faded words, "Tomorrow will be better," she wrote, in small, steady letters, "Tonight, I mattered, a silent act." a whispered kindness, an anonymous offering. Outside the window, the town of Gettysburg blurred into the misty rain. But somewhere deep within Chloe, for the first time in a long while, a tiny ember flared to life and held. A harsh white light stabbed through Ethan's eyelids. A steady beeping echoed in his ears, the sterile, familiar hum of a hospital heart monitor. He slowly cracked his eyes open, squinting against the fluorescent glare overhead. The sharp tang of antiseptic filled his nose. A dull ache pulsed in his temple and down his arm. When he tried to shift, he found himself tethered in place by IV lines and monitoring leads. A figure appeared beside the bed, a nurse in navy blue scrubs. When she saw he was awake, she smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Mr. Grayson," she said, checking the monitors with gentle efficiency. "You were in a car accident. We found you on a rainy night." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat felt scraped raw. The nurse quickly handed him a cup of water. After a few careful sips, he rasped, Did someone save me?" The nurse nodded. "Someone called 911. When the rescue team arrived, you were unconscious, but..." She hesitated, her expression softening, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled slip of paper, carefully laminated to protect it. Ethan's heart twisted with sudden recognition, a flicker of memory, a hand gripping his, a voice murmuring through the chaos, anchoring him to life. "You're going to be okay." His hands trembled as he accepted the paper. The handwriting was crooked, hurried, but every letter radiated an urgent tenderness. He clutched it like a lifeline. Who was it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No one knows," the nurse said softly. By the time the ambulance got there, she was already gone. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to hold on to the feeling of that hand. Small, cold, yet impossibly warm. Days later, when Ethan was discharged, the sky still wept in a soft, endless drizzle. Dressed in a grey hoodie and jeans, a beanie pulled low over the stitches on his temple, Ethan stepped out of Gettysburg Memorial Hospital, his mind buzzing with unanswered questions. He couldn't stop thinking about that night. About the hand, about the whisper that had carried him back from the edge. In the car, as his assistant prattled on about rescheduling meetings and pending contracts, Ethan interrupted. "I want to start a podcast," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A podcast?" The assistant blinked. "About the company?" "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "About the person who saved me." The next day, Ethan sat alone in a small recording studio inside his Manhattan penthouse. No makeup, no PR team. Just him, raw, vulnerable. "Real?" He leaned into the microphone and pressed record. "Hi, I'm Ethan Grayson," he began, his voice low and rough with emotion. "Maybe you know me as the CEO of Grayson Tech. Maybe you've never heard of me." He paused, gathering himself. "I just want to tell a story. About a night of rain. About a moment I believe changed my life forever." He spoke of the skid, the crash, the cold and fear. And then, of the hand that found his in the darkness, of the words that had kept him breathing. "You're going to be okay." His voice broke slightly as he continued. "I don't know who she was. I never saw her face. But I owe her my life." Ethan looked up, staring straight into the camera. "If you're hearing this, I just want to say thank you. And if you're willing, someday I hope I can meet you, to tell you in person what I couldn't say that night." No one on Ethan's team expected what happened next. Within 2 hours, the podcast had racked up over 200,000 listens. On Twitter, the hashtag #FindTheAngelOfGettysburg soared to the top of the national trending list. News outlets, blogs, local stations all dove headfirst into the mystery of the rainy night angel. Everyone wanted to know, who was she? Why did she disappear without a word? Could a stranger really save a millionaire and walk away without asking for anything in return? The story struck a chord across the country. In a world often crowded with noise and selfishness, the thought that someone would simply stop, in the rain, in the dark, to save a stranger without seeking recognition or reward, ignited something deep and aching in people's hearts. In a quiet corner of Gettysburg, Chloe sat frozen in her tiny apartment, staring at her phone as it buzzed with notifications. The headline blazed across her screen: CEO Ethan Grayson searching for rainstorm angel. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. She gripped the phone tighter. A part of her bloomed warm and fierce. I saved him. But another part shrank back, flooded with fear, because Chloe knew if she stepped out of the shadows, the world would see her. And she wasn't sure she was ready. Outside the window, the rain slipped down the glass in soft silver ribbons, blurring the world beyond, and reflected faintly in the misted pane was the face of a young woman, nervous, trembling, but lit from within by a fragile, dawning hope, the girl the whole world was trying to find. The small room was steeped in the soft, muted glow of an old desk lamp. Chloe curled into the armchair, wrapped tightly in a wool blanket, her eyes locked on the phone screen, clenched between her fingers. She had listened to the podcast at least 5 times. Each time it squeezed her heart a little tighter. Ethan Grayson, someone she'd only known through tech articles and glossy Forbes covers, sat there in front of a microphone, his voice low and steady, his eyes heartbreakingly sincere, telling the world about the rainy night she had pulled him back from the brink. Chloe clutched the phone so tightly, her knuckles whitened. She remembered every detail, the feel of icy mud seeping through her battered boots, the relentless rain pounding. On the SUV's roof, the cold weight of his hand in hers. She had been terrified. She had wanted to run, but she had stayed. And now the entire world was looking for her. The angel in the rain, as the headlines called her. Chloe pressed her forehead to her knees, her chest aching with a shapeless fear. She, a nameless freelance programmer, from Gettysburg. How could she ever stand under the blinding lights of that world? How could she possibly face someone like Ethan Grayson? He lived in a universe of glass penthouses, glittering galas and boardrooms where millions shifted hands with a signature. And her. Chloe looked around her crumbling apartment, peeling paint on the walls, sagging bookshelves, a threadbare rug, a world 1,000 galaxies away from his. She thought of her college years, how she had been mocked for her outdated clothes, her silent presence, her reluctance to join the noise and clamor of the crowds. Chloe had never once felt good enough, and now that old raw feeling surged back stronger than ever. "He's a CEO," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I'm nobody." She set the phone down on the table and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Outside, the rain continued to drum against the windows, a slow, sorrowful rhythm. The phone buzzed again. Chloe glanced at it. More headlines, more videos, more frantic searching for the anonymous savior. Part of her wanted to scream, "I'm here," but another part, older, quieter, afraid, whispered back, Don't let them see you. Don't let them be disappointed." Chloe stood and began pacing the small room, her thoughts whipping through her like a storm. If she stepped into the light, people would expect her to be someone strong, extraordinary, someone worthy of the title hero. But she wasn't. She was Chloe, a girl who feared crowds, who shrank from gazes, who flinched at the thought of being hurt again. She walked to the window and peeled back the curtain. Outside, the faded glow of the street lamps glistened on the slick sidewalk. A mail carrier trudged past, his hood drooping with rain. Gettysburg remained as it always was, quiet, unchanging, unaware that in a tiny second-floor apartment, a girl wrestled with a decision that could alter the course of her life. Chloe sank to the floor, her back against the wall, her eyes red and stinging. She thought of Ethan, the look on his face as he spoke into the microphone, the rough crack of his voice as he said, "If you're hearing this, and I please know that you saved me." There had been no startup bravado in that voice, no calculation, only pure unguarded gratitude. Chloe closed her eyes. A memory flickered across her mind, a small hand gripping his in the storm, a silent promise passed between them. "You're going to be okay." That was all she had to offer him that night. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. She whispered to herself, "I don't have to be a hero, I just have to be true to what I did." Tears slid down her cheeks, mingling with a small, bittersweet smile. Maybe kindness didn't have to be loud. Maybe saving someone, even if they never knew your name, was already enough. Outside, the rain finally began to lift. Beyond the thinning clouds, a few tentative stars blinked awake. In the quiet of the darkened room, Chloe sat still, her heart heavy but calmer now. She wasn't ready yet to step into that brilliant, blinding world. But deep down, she knew, someday, she would, because sometimes light doesn't seek the perfect, it finds those who dared to be kind when no one was watching. 2 weeks after the podcast aired, the story of the rainstorm angel still burned brightly. Instead of diving back into the whirl of his CEO life, Ethan Grayson stunned his entire team with a single announcement. He wanted to hold an open hiring event in Gettysburg, a small, unremarkable town, one hardly anyone at Grayson Tech had ever set foot in. A strange decision, maybe even a reckless one, unless you understood the real reason behind it. The event was simply named Grayson Tech Open House, Gettysburg Hiring Day. Posters flooded local Facebook groups, fluttered on billboards at the town's edges, even crackled over the local radio stations. Grayson Tech is looking for talent, open to all, developers, designers, content creators, direct hiring opportunities. With CEO Ethan Grayson, Gettysburg Public Library this Saturday at 10 p.m. The night before the event, Chloe sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the printed poster spread out on the table. She had been wavering for a week. Go. Stay hidden. Logic screamed, don't be foolish, hide for as long as you can. But her heart whispered, just look. Just once. Chloe didn't know exactly what she wanted. She only knew that deep within she ached to see him, the man she had saved, the man the world had turned into a symbol, but who, to her, was still just a man. Fragile, human, no different from the rest of them. The morning sky over Gettysburg hung thick with clouds, the sun too weak to pierce the mist. A damp, earthy smell lingered after the night's rain, carried by a sharp, cool wind. Chloe stood at the edge of the street, clutching the strap of her backpack, her gaze fixed on the public library across the road. A white banner fluttered between two red brick pillars. Grayson Tech Open House, welcome future creators. Around her, clusters of young people gathered, shirts crisply ironed, skirts and suits neatly pressed, laptops hugged to their chests, portfolios tucked under polished arms. The clatter of shoes echoed up the limestone steps. Chloe swallowed. Hard, her palms slick with sweat despite the chill in the air. She wore a simple beige trench coat, her hair pinned back in a low bun, her face lightly made up, though her hand had trembled each time she'd touched the lipstick to her lips. That morning, I'm just going to look, she told herself. Nothing more, just witness. Even that thought made her knees wobble. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors, and immediately the vastness of the library's main hall overwhelmed her. Usually reserved for modest town lectures and historical exhibits, today the space had been transformed into something modern and sleek. Long tables lined the walls. Grayson Tech posters stood proudly along marble columns, while soft, cold light spilled through the towering windows. At the far end, a small stage had been set. Chairs were neatly arranged, waiting for speeches to begin. A voice floated gently through the PA. Welcome to the Grayson Tech Open House. Please register at the front desk before attending the open interview sessions. Chloe hesitated at the edge of the crowd, then slipped along the wall, trying to make herself invisible. A young woman in a crisp white blouse greeted her at the reception desk. Hi there. Could you please sign in? Chloe ducked her head, letting her hair shield her face. She picked up the pen, her hand shaking slightly, and scrawled quickly, Chloe Bennett, software. Developer. No one looked twice. No one asked questions. There were no camera flashes, no spotlights, only the soft rustle of hopeful candidates, registering one after another, chasing a quiet dream. Chloe clutched a glossy Grayson Tech brochure and slipped into a row of empty chairs along the wall, trying to steady her breathing. From the corner of her eye, she saw him, Ethan Grayson. He stood near the stage, talking to the event staff, dressed in a soft grey shirt, dark jeans, white sneakers. So effortlessly simple that no one would guess he was the CEO everyone was here for. No cameras, no PR handlers, just him, focused, kind, listening carefully to each person he spoke with. Chloe squeezed the brochure tighter. In her hand, she wasn't ready to face him. Not yet, but for now, it was enough just to sit here quietly, hidden, just witnessing him from afar. It was enough to know she had stepped out from the dark, if only a little. She drew a deep breath and let her gaze wander up to the tall windows, where soft gold sunlight seeped through the mist. A new day, a new chapter. Her hands still shook, her heart still raced, but she was here, and for Chloe that was already a beginning. The soft murmur of the loudspeaker drifted across the vaulted ceiling. The rustle of papers, the tap of polished shoes, the low, expectant hum of hopeful candidates. But for Ethan, in that moment, all the noise fell away. He stood in the center of the Gettysburg Library's grand hall, his gaze sweeping over rows of chairs, clusters of murmuring conversations, faces lit with cautious dreams. And then he saw her tucked away in the farthest corner, shrinking into the shadows as if afraid to touch the light. A fall of long brown hair veiling part of her face, slender shoulders trembling under, a plain beige trench coat, a hand gripping a brochure so tightly it seemed she might fall apart without it. Ethan couldn't explain it. No logic, no reason. One glance, and he knew it was her, the one who had held his hand through the merciless rain, the one who had whispered salvation into his ear. "You're going to be okay." A shiver rippled down his spine. He moved toward her, each step as cautious as walking across a sheet of glass, each footfall sounding like a drumbeat against his racing heart. Chloe sat frozen. She had felt his eyes from the very first moment, that gaze, steady, warm, slicing through the invisible walls she had spent years building around herself. Her hands trembled. She tried to melt into the chair, into the dim corner, but it was too late. Her heart thudded wildly, a trapped bird battering against the cage of her ribs. Cold sweat prickled along her spine, her forehead damp beneath her bangs. She knew. One glance, one single glance, and she knew he had seen her. No proof. No confession. Only the invisible scars they both bore, and the way their hearts recognized each other's wounds. Ethan stopped in front of her. He was so close now that he could hear the quiver in her breath, feel the fragile warmth radiating from her small frame. Slowly he lowered himself, crouching down so their eyes met. No pressure, no demands, just a quiet presence. Steady, patient, like the first soft light after a storm. Chloe lifted her head, her eyes wide, glistening, hiding oceans of fear but also shimmering with a tentative hope. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if even breathing too hard might shatter the delicate thread strung between them. In her gaze he saw everything. The fear of being hurt again. The battle between fleeing and staying, and the courage, small but burning like a flickering candle in the wind, refusing to be snuffed out. A slow, warm smile broke across Ethan's face. Not the smile of a CEO, not the smile of a man who had conquered rooms and headlines, but the smile of a man, grateful, vulnerable, seeking something just as much as the girl before him. He slipped, a hand into the pocket of his jacket, pulled out a small business card. With steady, deliberate hands, as if offering a treasure, he extended it toward her. His voice, low and roughened by emotion, barely carried across the space between them. "If you don't want to be a hero, at least be my colleague. If you don't want to be a hero, at least be part of my world." Chloe froze. She stared at the card, her hands twitching, trembling with the weight of unshed tears. She wanted to cry. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to run from the room. She wanted to clutch that card to her chest like a lifeline. She had spent her whole life running from judgment, from expectations, even from herself. And now, someone, the very soul she had pulled back from the abyss, was opening a door for her. No demands, no judgment, no conditions, only an invitation, kind and patient. Slowly, Chloe reached out. The moment her fingertips brushed the card, a jolt raced down her spine, not pain, awakening. For the first time she felt seen, truly, deeply seen, not because she was perfect, not because she was anyone's hero, but because she, just as she was enough. A tear slipped down Chloe's cheek, tracing a path of quiet grace across her face. She didn't wipe it away. Ethan said nothing more. He simply smiled, that same steady, patient smile, promising, "I'll be here. Whenever you're ready." Chloe clutched the business card in her hand, her heart breaking open, not from sorrow but from a sweetness too vast to contain. She dipped her head in a small, trembling nod, a small gesture, but in Chloe's quiet world, it was a leap, a step out of the darkness, a step toward the light. Outside the tall windows, a fragile sunlight pierced the heavy grey clouds, casting golden beams across the old library shelves, the empty chairs, the two souls who had somehow found each other in the vastness of the world. Among thousands of faces, thousands of lives, Ethan and Chloe had seen each other, not with words, but with their hearts. Morning in New York City carried its own distinct kind of magic. The early winds rushed along 6th Avenue, laced with the scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries drifting from corner cafes. Chloe stepped out of the Grayson Tech Building, a wee, gleaming glass tower nestled in the heart of Midtown's bustle. Sunlight danced across her soft brown hair, and somehow every step she took on the crowded sidewalk felt lighter. Around her neck hung a new employee badge, Chloe Bennett, software developer, Grayson Tech. It was a small, weightless thing, but for Chloe, it carried the heavy gravity of years spent alone, of silent fears, of dreams long buried under the rubble of doubt. And now, it was her first true proof that she had stepped beyond all of that. Wading through the tide of commuters, Chloe felt a light, buzzing thrill inside her chest, no longer hiding in a dark, cramped room, no longer slipping into the streets only, under the cover of night, no longer whispering dreams into the void, only to smother them herself. She was here, in broad daylight, in a city that never slept, alive with car horns and laughter, and the low, endless hum of a million intertwined dreams. And for the first time, Chloe didn't feel lost in it. She felt like she belonged to this vast, unruly, vibrant world brimming with color and possibility. At a busy crosswalk, she paused, lifting her eyes skyward. Skyscrapers loomed, their glass faces catching the morning light, giant electronic billboards flashing and pulsing with color. Above it all, the New York sky stretched wide, clear, brilliant, infinite. No more cold rain pressing her down, no more darkness to flee, only open sky, like outstretched arms. Chloe closed her eyes and drew in a deep breath, letting the wind tangle her hair, letting the sun soak into her skin. And then, she smiled. Not a trembling, hesitant smile, a real one, bright, fearless, and wholly alive. The smile of a girl who had dared to step out of the shadows. The smile of someone who had once been nobody, but who now was everything she needed. To be full, brave, beautiful. The crosswalk signal beeped. Chloe opened her eyes, squared her shoulders, and strode forward, blending into the river of people flowing across the street. Her heart beat steady and strong, like a joyful song only she could. Here she didn't know what awaited her down the line. Challenges, long days, mistakes, setbacks, they would all come. But today she had conquered the hardest thing of all, the fear that lived inside her. And with that victory, Chloe knew, whatever happened next, she was going to be okay, not because someone else whispered it to her, but because now finally she could whisper it to herself. Sometimes it's the smallest, quietest acts, a hand reaching through the rain, a whispered, "You're going to be okay," that have the power to change a life forever. And it's in those unseen moments when no one is watching that we find true light, the kind born of kindness, courage, and a quiet trust in ourselves. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be brave enough to step out of the shadows. And the world will open its arms to you, just like Chloe, just like all of us. Thank you for listening to the story, Shy Girl Who Saved a CEO's Life and Disappeared Without a Word. If you believe in the power of quiet kindness, in the magic of small unseen acts, leave a comment and share how this story made you feel. Don't forget to hit subscribe to hear more inspiring stories like this one. and tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment that might just touch your heart. We can't wait to walk alongside you on this journey, one story, one light at a time.